On the first part of this conversation, we encountered Sydney's struggle with mental health and OCD in particular. And I really wanted to find out whether he's been misunderstood in the process, whether people have really not gotten what it's like to have what he has and go through what he goes through, and whether he feels bad about it. And so I asked him, how does he feel about not being understood? Does it make him feel bad? Is he okay with it?
Not quite, because I don't expect people to understand me.
Ouch.
I know it's true, and I'm not saying it from a bad place, by the way. I don't know if it's because I've never lived that way. I've never lived with the hope that I hope you understand me, like, or I want you to understand me, or I'd love it if you understand me, but if you don't understand me, I also understand that you're going through your own human experience, your own journey, and again, if I literally explain to you what happens in my head, even I know it's irrational. Me who's suffering through it knows that this thing is irrational. Like, knows that the way my mind sometimes interprets things, like I catch it's sometimes like you catch yourself, but because it feels so real, I can't, like, it's, it's irrational, but sometimes you feel like you can't do anything about it. So imagine explaining that to someone who doesn't go through it and be like, actually, the likely thing you're going to tell me is, just don't think about it.
Which makes it worse.
Which is, like, don't you think you really think I've not thought about not thinking about it, So I don't expect you to understand me. But with regards to how I relate to, like, other people is, I'm never shy about talking about myself, talking about things that I face, because I didn't ask this I didn't ask this upon myself. Like, I didn't wish this on myself. So my thoughts are, if I can do something to help someone else who's going through something similar, I'd do it in a heartbeat. But I also know that the people who say things like pray about it and all these things, I really don't have malicious intent. They really think they're helping. They really think they're genuinely helping. And sometimes I will not be like, you really think I've not read? You really think that I'm not praying? I won't say, because I know you're really trying to help. And sometimes I just like, you might not understand, and it's okay. Maybe at a later forum or a later time, I'll be able to explain to you better. But sometimes I feel like the more, if I go out of my way to explain,
it makes it even
hard. Like, it doesn't do any good at that point. So sometimes I'm very selective on, like, if someone tells me pray about it, I'm like, oh, thank you. And I'll just let it end there, because I'm like, I don't know if this conversation would be fruitful if I tell you that I'm praying. But it's like, and that's the thing that you need to, like, I think many people need to know about mental health. Meds are good and all, but meds just manage symptoms. But for a number of disorders and mental health and anxiety disorders, the treatment is habitual. Like, the things you have to constantly do to redirect your neural pathways in the brain to react differently to certain things. Like, for example, I remember my first therapy session, the therapist said, she told me, I'm not here to make you feel better. I'm here to make you better at feeling. I was like, I know. I was like, as in, really, this is not a time for you to be deep. I'm suffering. That's what I was thinking. I'm like, don't be deep. Just help me. But that's the thing. Like, she told me that the anxiety is not the problem. The intrusive thoughts are not the problem, because everyone experiences those things. Your relation and reaction to the intrusive thoughts and anxiety is a problem. So she was like, we're not trying to, recovery for you is not getting rid of anxiety. You can't get rid of something every normal person has. You can only change how you relate to your anxiety. And so she kept telling me, instead of trying to wish your anxiety away, you should welcome more of your anxiety and learn to sit with the discomfort. And that takes practice. That takes practice, because you have to train or teach your brain that every time you feel like you feel a fear response, it doesn't mean that you're in danger. So anytime you're anxious, you just sit through the anxiety, and over a period of time your brain realizes that, oh, this is no longer a threat. And that's the thing with mental health. You constantly, there's certain habits you have to, or tools that you have to have in place to constantly practice and practice and practice till your brain gets it. And you pray alongside that because it's hard, and you pray for strength to do that. But essentially they're just bad habits you formed over time. Sometimes you're born with it, which is I think most people say with OCD, like sometimes you can be born with it. Most people actually think born with it, but there's a way you can reverse it by it takes practice. It's not just, of course you can pray and it can be, I believe in prayer, it can happen, but until God does that for me, if this is my part to play, to constantly do the things that I'm taught in therapy, then I'll do. Until that time comes when he decides to get rid of it, his will be done.
We often call to God to take away all our troubles, all our mistakes, everything that we're going through, all our trials and temptations. We often call for him to just calm the storm. But Sidney reminds me that, often God doesn't calm the storm. He calms us in the storm. And he wants us to fight even through those hardest times. Because sin isn't as simple as we think it is. And God sees and he knows why it's important for you to battle and struggle with this. And I'm reminded honestly to keep battling even when things don't seem to change, even when circumstances don't seem to change. Like that statement by your therapist, like, I'm not here to help
Make you feel better. Make you better at feeling.
Yes. Do you think that's like generally what God is doing through all of this for you and for generally us? Because we all struggle with stuff, and maybe he's not here to make us feel better, but to make us better at seeing things from his perspective. But we are just caught up in seeing things and trying to feel better at how we are seeing things. I don't know. And even like about the podcast we were talking about, like thinking about how we think about things is so different from how he sees it,
You're right. I think one thing that I've learned a lot about, like through my experience, is I always I can only relate. I've done this in relationships, but I feel like OCD has really taught me that God is value driven and driven by principles. Like living a godly life means living according to your values and principles, and not according to your emotions. And I found that to be easy when it comes to emotions such as sadness, happiness, or joy. Okay, maybe happiness. But I never applied the same principle to anxiety. Like, I feel like it's like what the therapist was saying essentially was, and what OCD treatment basically involves, is you can be anxious but still go on and do the things that mean the most to you in life. You can, and that's some things I've learned, like what you're talking about. The Bible says, talking about praise God in the storm. That's not the type of praise you do when you're happy. That means you're suffering. You're in the heart of your suffering. You're crying. Probably you're anxious. But made me start look at like godly things in such a principled manner. Like praise is not something you only do when you're happy. Like praise is praise in itself, regardless of whether you're anxious, you're happy, you're sad. You feel like praising, you don't feel like praising, you just praise. Praise because praising God is the right thing to do. And if that's a lesson, like I feel like OCD is trying to get me to do, like, you don't have to feel a certain type of way to do certain things that God requires you to do. And even this goes to all the things that I think that we do in our day-to-day lives. Like, if you're working, if you're whatever doing these things, you can be extremely sad. But that doesn't mean that the things you need to do in that day are not valuable. They are. So you go ahead and do it whether you're sad or not. Because you're not living, or we're not doing things based on how we feel, but we're doing things based on whether they're right or wrong. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. I've never thought about it like that, but it also reinforces the fact that God loving us is a choice. Like, he
Yes.
doesn't have to.
Yes.
Even with the pain we cause him,
Yes.
still love. And I guess that's a lesson he wants us to learn. Like, when we choose to love him, let's love him for just loving him. That's so hard. So
It is, because even like Philippians 4:6 saying, what's the verse that talks about letting go of your anxiety, like
do
with
not be anxious
about anything.
but through prayers.
Yeah. And like, you being anxious is not the problem. It's, I think when it says like do not be anxious about anything, it's now the anxiety. I feel like anxiety, the verb, where you're now dwelling in your anxiety. You get like where you're anxious and now you are literally reacting to that anxiety, and you're actually like you're being guided by the anxiety in every choices that you make. But the thing that I've had to learn even in therapy, which is hard but definitely manageable, is the fact that anxiety, just like happiness, happiness is like sadness, jealousy, all these emotions that you feel are involuntary. You never sit down and be like, today I want to be happy. There's something that happens that just triggers that emotion, right? Same thing with anxiety. But whenever you are sad, we never try to not be sad. We are usually like, oh, today I'm sad, and you just wait until the sadness just goes. If at all it goes. If at all you're not dealing with, for example, like major depression, anything of the sort. But like, and even with regards to major depression, I don't know how that is treated, but I think there's the whole lesson we have to learn, that emotions are just that. They're just emotions, and they're not facts, and thoughts are not facts either. Like, you can be anxious, but that has nothing to do, it's not related or correlated to any way with reality. Like, it does not necessarily mean that whatever you're anxious about, because anxiety has a way of distorting reality. You kind of see the negative of everything when you're anxious. So that's one thing I've had to learn. Like, emotions and thoughts are just that. They're just emotions and thoughts. They're not facts.
I must say Sidney is crazy. I think he's really crazy, because how can I keep joyful even when my circumstances aren't peaceful? And that's such a hard struggle. But I think he's onto something, and I really want to find out what he thinks about how we can do that. And this is what he told me.
I think, in my opinion, that's the most powerful person. That's the most powerful state you can ever be in. Because you're not fazed by... Because if you just think back at how many things, even today, think about the things you do when you're happy, and think about the things you don't do when you're not happy, and ask yourself, if the things you did when you're happy, were they really value driven, or were you driven by emotion? And do those things mean that much to you? Like, you've ever been when you're happy and you do certain things, and at that moment you're like, it's like when you used to have motivational speakers come and talk to you in high school or anything. That day you want to read all books. It's not an authentic way of... It's not an authentic reaction. It's definitely emotional, like driven by emotion,
yeah.
right? Because you can't sustain it. You can sustain it for a whole term. You can only do it for like 2 days, and then you're back to your old self. So, like, I've had to question a lot of my motives. Like, am I doing this because I am just currently emotionally uplifted, and is this something that I'd be able to sustain for a while? And I feel like I kind of applied that when it came to like relationships, not relationships, like my current relationship. I applied that model, and it served me well, but I never applied it in life in general, especially when dealing with anxiety. Like anxiety is just an emotion. Like these are the emotions, and it's uncomfortable, but it will go away after a couple of minutes. Like I just feel anxious for a couple of minutes or even a day, but it's not here to last. And whatever I'm anxious about is most likely not the way things are gonna turn out.
I definitely have so much to think about now after all that Sidney is saying. And I went on further to ask him about some more things that helped him through his struggle with mental health. And I really wanted to find something that I ask myself all the time. When God comes to help me through my struggle, is the healing once and for all? Do we struggle sometimes, even for life, without ever feeling, 100% better?
No, I wasn't. Not because I have anything against medication, but I think everyone's recovery journey is unique to them, and if you feel like medication is what will help you get through, go ahead. I think I'm a bit of a hard head myself. Like I felt like I wanted to just
Battle it in a different way.
and until the point where I'm like, okay, I've given my all with this. Now let me try medication, but that was just my personal preference. But honestly, a lot of my experience has just been God, because, of course, now I know a bit more about OCD, and I'm still like recovery takes longer than I hope. I hope for. I wish it was just one, the same way my brain snapped in 2019. I wish it would just snap back into place, like after realizing, oh, this is what I need to do. But it doesn't take that way, because I've been doing the same compulsions for 28 years. So who am I to think that my brain will just snap back in a week? It takes time for me to reverse the things that I was doing normally, like I was doing so naturally. But then I think God, honestly, God, because like it really got me to places where I was. I think for sure these past 3 years have been the hardest of my life ever, and like 2019 and even last year, media was pretty bad, and every day you just learn something new about your brain, and I'm like, oh, okay, so this is what I've been doing wrong, and it's an ongoing journey, and sometimes you think you've got it, and sometimes OCD will lie to you that you're back to where you were, but you aren't. You just keep pushing, and it gets more manageable. And I think you just takes practice. Of course, you're not back to where you were. But honestly, it's just been good, because even the way I got the therapist in the first place was just miracle. Because I really looked for therapists for OCD here in Kenya, and a number of therapists, and I felt like I wasn't getting. I'd done a lot of research about OCD, so there's certain things I was, which again I'd advise anyone who's going through any challenge, like if you can try and do a bit of research for yourself, because then there's certain things I was expecting therapists to say that I felt like they weren't saying. And so, like when it got really bad, like last year July got really bad, and I was now at this point I was like just emailing therapists even everywhere. They were just sending mass emails at some point. But then therapists, especially in the US, have this. Most therapists actually have this. There are telehealth laws where they can't treat like different regions, because their licenses maybe are only applicable in a particular, But so I got the help of, there's a lady called Chrissy Hodges. She's amazing. She also has OCD, and she has this thing called peer support, where she helps people who are going through OCD as well, and also kind of refers them to, or connects them with therapists who can.
Is it like on the Facebook group?
Pardon?
Is it on the Facebook group?
I on like
You have like a OCD group.
there are many groups. There are many support groups. I got out of them. I think that's a story for another day, because I was obsessing about recovery, and so I just kept researching and researching and researching about, and it's part of the disorder, I guess. But then she really connected me to many, like a list of therapists who treat OCD, and so I started sending them emails. The problem is they are expensive. So when I was getting the rate cards back, they were $300. $300 per session. I'm like, oh, for sure, can't afford. So I sent an email to a practice called Beyond Borders, CBT, and I think the person who's it's the manager, I don't know if it's the secretary or the manager, the person who's the admin person basically responds with the rate cards for the various therapists, and the director of that practice, she's called Ashley. So what actually happens is, in the email that I'd sent out to their info email address, just detailed out everything. I'm in Kenya, I'm all these things. I'm just a student that finished masters and all that. And so Ashley saw the email, and she responds, and she's like, "Oh, hey Sidney, coincidentally, this is after the manager had already sent me the admin person had already sent me the rate card. So even hers was expensive, because hers was $200, I think, a session, and I was like, I'm definitely not gonna afford that. So I'd already, at this point, I'd just like almost given up. So she's actually herself now, the owner of the whole practice, the director, sends an email, and she's like, coincidentally, I lived in Kenya a part of my life. And she says, I know prices are a bit high. How much are you able to afford? Like that itself, I swear, was this was my whole experience with OCD. By the has been like, there's been pockets of miracles, and this is one of them. And so I tell her that at this point I know rates in Kenya for a session are like 3,000 to 5,000 an hour. So I was like, okay, I'm not gonna
shoot
nyanyase sana, as in, let me at least just, because I was like, okay, I don't have money, I'm a student, but let me at least then say $70. If I told she agrees, because her rates are $200. And so she says, that's fine, that works. I'm really keen on providing evidence-based treatment to people globally to help more people with OCD. And I was like, wow. And so she has other therapists under her, and I thought she'd direct me to them.
person,
and then she just sends another email, and she says, if it's okay with you, I'd like to treat you myself.
Wow.
And that was the beginning of of a very interesting journey. And so she's been my therapist since last year, August, and there's been progress, and still have therapy now, I think monthly, or sometimes bi-monthly, or once in 2 months.
It's clear that God can bring us out of the deepest pits of all the pain and suffering that we go through, and He's able to make all things new. He's able to give us light in our dark. And I think, you know what? I think it's exactly the reason why we're supposed to help others. I think this isn't just for ourselves. He takes us out, and He makes our storm be the reason why other people's flowers grow.
But yeah, honestly, I'd love to. Okay, I'd love to. I don't know if I have the consistency to do a podcast. Like, if I had a co-host for a podcast, by the way, I legit would do a podcast every week. For me, like doing a podcast is like gym. Like, I have the psych, but if I go to the gym alone,
1 day, 2 days.
you start looking for excuses. Maybe I've said everything I need to say, things like that. But yeah, I'd love to help, especially in our setting, because you see, people in the West have really advanced when it comes to therapy. I think therapy has only become a very common thing, slightly common thing now, where you have more people opening up to actually seeing therapists, and it's like people are opening up to the idea of therapy, But I'm open to I'm also cognizant of the fact that there are not many people who can afford therapy, but therapy is expensive. For many people who don't even have insurance, like 3,000 to 5,000 an hour,
It's difficult.
that's crazy.
Insurance doesn't even cover most times.
Yeah. So, but if there, and I'm not looking to substitute therapy because I'm not licensed, I have no practice, but if my experience and some of the tools that I've learned or I'm still learning with my OCD can help someone, because like anyone dealing with anxiety, like one thing that I've learned, avoidance and all those things only make your anxiety worse.
Worse.
Do not run away from your triggers. And I don't know if this, again, be very cautious. I don't know if this applies to all anxiety disorders, but from a number of anxiety disorders that I've seen, running away from your triggers only makes your anxiety worse, because you're reinforcing in your brain that this particular thing is dangerous. Meanwhile, running towards your triggers is basically running towards freedom, because the moment your brain realizes that, oh, this is not anything that should scare you anymore, then you're becoming more and more free and liberated, and you can do what you want to do. But you see, those are things, some of the things that I never knew, because the natural human response to anxiety is, I just need to avoid that thing, you know. So my hope is, if I could ever, and I feel like I don't think I can have OCD for no reason. There has to be I always believe like everything happens for a reason. So the reason why God was like, yeah, let that boy over there deal with or struggle with. Like, I'll allow him to go through that. And if I'm supposed to go through this to help other people, if that's a lesson that I'm supposed to learn, and in the process, that's it. Like, if it's not supposed to go away, maybe I'm supposed to deal with this my whole life. It's a painful pill to swallow, but if it means that I'm supposed to go through this so another person can feel better, another person can get help, another person can learn that you can actually recover and live like a fulfilling life like everyone else. If my experience is supposed to get them that, then yeah, I'd do it. And if it's through podcasts, if it's through getting opportunities to talk or share my experience, yeah.
And so if you found out that your struggle was important for someone else being better, then I think it's worth the struggle. Keep struggling, keep trusting God, because I honestly think that's how He comes and gives us peace, even as we give others the help. So today, even as you're going through your hard time, think about someone else who might benefit from your hard time. Not be indifferent to your own hard times, but God could be using you for such a great purpose. And taking it away at once is easy, but will it help someone else?